everyone, or afternoon, or wherever you may be. Like Krupa said, my name is Camille Myers. I've worked at Kenneth Young Center in the CCPRD division since July of 2020 after receiving my bachelor's degree in psychology from Augustana College. I work in the substance use prevention department, and I have a passion for helping teens and parents understand mental health a little bit better. You can go ahead to the next slide. So Kenneth Young Center provides mental health services for people ages 2 to 99 and has various offices throughout the Chicagoland area. So in like Elk Grove Village, Illinois, Mount Prospect, Schaumburg, and Hoffman Estates. We also have a multitude of services, including mental health services, prevention services, and recovery services. If you have more questions about the specifics on those, you can visit our website or give us a call that is on the with the number on the screen. So here are the objectives for today. We're going to just be touching on, you can put questions, like Krupa said, in the chat box, and then at the end, we'll do a time for a question and answer. So please do take advantage of the chat box in case you don't want to forget something. And then, yeah, we'll go over that. And then along with the slides will be available, as well as a couple other take-home resources in about a week when we send out that email with the video from today. So the goals are to give background on mental health, mental illness, stress, and burnout, to give some insight on the impact of COVID-19 and mental health, to provide tips on how to alleviate some of these struggles, and to provide some resources for finding relief for mental health struggles. So let's talk about mental health a little bit. I'm sure that we've all heard the phrase or know what it is, but what exactly is it, and how does it affect our daily life? So mental health includes our overall emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps us to determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is an important part of life at every stage, from childhood to adolescence and all the way through adulthood. Something to note is that when we say our mental health, we're talking about overall brain wellness and not necessarily just when we have poor mental health. So what can affect our mental health? There are a variety of things, such as biological factors like genes or brain chemistry, life experiences like abuse or trauma, family history of mental health problems, lifestyles such as diet, physical activity, and substance use. Some other factors might include social isolation or loneliness, experiencing discrimination and stigma. So this could be marginalized groups like people of color or the LGBTQ plus community, social disadvantage like poverty or debt, bereavement or grief, losing someone close to you, having severe long-term stress, having a long-term physical health condition, unemployment or losing your job, homelessness or even poor housing, and then being a long-term caretaker for someone else. These things can affect our mental health in a variety of ways, including being more susceptible to developing a mental illness or just being at higher risk for having mental health struggles. So what are mental health disorders / mental illnesses? Mental illnesses refer collectively to all diagnosable mental health disorders and health conditions involving significant changes in thinking, emotions, and or behavior, and also distress and or family and or problems functioning in social work or family activities. Some examples might include anxiety disorders, mood disorders like depression or bipolar disorders 1 and 2, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorders, eating disorders, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When we talk about mental illness, it's important for us to remember that many of these disorders do have overlapping symptoms, so sometimes it can be hard to diagnose. The stigma associated with mental illness often comes from the idea that people are being overdramatic or seeking attention, or that even they might need to like grow tougher skin. But the reality of the situation is that when a mental illness is present, there's a chemical imbalance that takes work and patience to readjust. So this specific fact shows that mental illnesses are actually pretty common. They can be anywhere from mild to severe. So 1 in 5 adults in America experience a mental illness. and 1/2 of chronic mental illness begins by age 14, 3/4 by the age of 24. The onset of mental illness oftentimes begins in adolescence. So when you think about like normal teenage angst, also think about the fact that hormones are changing, and this can also be a time where mental illnesses might set in. Being candid about my life and my situation, when I started struggling with my mental health, I was around the age of 13, and now I'm 23. So this has been like a whole lifelong journey, and it's actually pretty common. So this is why it's important for us to talk about these things pretty candidly and as honestly as we can. So this quote, mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a medical problem, just like heart disease or diabetes. A lot of times a person who either lives with a mental illness or a parent of someone with a mental illness can have a lot of shame attached to that fact. But just like the quote says, mental illnesses are medical problems. And just like you wouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed that you have a cold or that your child has a cold, we should have the same mindset about mental health struggles. So what are the signs and symptoms of a mental health problem? Persistent sadness for 2 weeks or more, difficulty concentrating, excessive fears or of worries, or extreme feelings of guilt or worthlessness, extreme mood changes, that's highs and lows, withdrawal from friends and activities that they used to enjoy, fatigue, changes in eating habits, so that could be eating too much or too little, changes in weight, which could be weight gain or weight loss, and difficulty sleeping. So that could be staying asleep, sleeping too much, or falling asleep. So some other ones are the inability to cope with daily problems or stress. So things that seem like they might be really easy all the time, those things become really difficult to cope with. Trouble understanding and relating to other people or different situations. Increased substance use, excessive anger, hostility, or violence, suicidal ideation or suicidal thinking, hurting oneself or talking about hurting oneself, and then talking about death or suicide. So that could even be something as people maybe like talk about flippantly, like, oh, like it doesn't have to be necessarily super serious. It can be in a flippant sort of way that you might not necessarily like soak in and think about. Something to note is that in cases of depression, a key thing would be if the symptoms are lasting for 2 weeks or longer. Younger students also typically complain of things like stomach aches or headaches when they're in a state of emotional distress. So this could be your student waking up for school and saying like, oh, my stomach hurts, but they're not like vomiting or they're not showing any other sickness symptoms. Complaining of stomach aches or headaches often before school could be a sign that they might be feeling a little bit anxious about something going on at school. So that could be something to check in on if that becomes a habit. So here are some signs of teen mental health struggles, which are slightly different but have a lot of overlap and are also joined along with the other signs and symptoms. So they could be outbursts of extreme irritability, out of control behavior that can be harmful, so recklessness, drastic mood changes and or behavior changes or personality changes, frequent headaches or stomach aches, like I mentioned before, difficulty concentrating, changes in academic performance, and trying to avoid or miss school. A lot of times when we think about mental illness in teenagers, the lines can become blurred between what's normal teenage angst and what's a sign of an ongoing ailment that needs to be addressed. Some important things to note is that mental illnesses disrupt daily functioning. So things that might seem super easy or second nature become really difficult. So like brushing your teeth, making your bed, doing their homework. If these things are becoming really difficult, or it seems like it's like pulling teeth to get your kid to do this, it might be a sign that there's something else going on aside from normal teen angst and not wanting to do their chores or not wanting to complete their homework. So if you're concerned about your child's mental health, please consult your child's mental health professionals through the school system, social workers, psychologists, guidance counselors, anything like that. Describe the behaviors that concern you, and then you can also talk to your child's teacher teachers, close friends, or relatives, or other caregivers to see if they've noticed the same sorts of behavior. You can also share this information with your primary healthcare doctor to see what the next best steps would be. So now that we've talked a little bit about mental health struggles, we can talk a little bit more about how to maintain mental wellness and how to take care of ourselves, whether we're struggling in the current moment or if our mental health is doing well. So the first one is to practice journaling. Practicing gratitude and writing down our positive and negative emotions has been connected to be a great way to improve mental health. A good way to start that is to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. It can be super small things. Like yesterday, I was super grateful for the sunshine and super happy that, even though it's super cold outside, we did have that sunshiny day. And then keeping a journal for your positive and your negative emotions are a great way to have an emotional release throughout the day. So if you're feeling poorly that day, it's a great way to just release that and get rid of that feeling that might be weighing on you, to practice journaling. The second one is to celebrate small victories. Sometimes on hard days, it can feel like you're getting nothing done, or like hard weeks where everything is piling up and you feel like you're not being very productive. But when you celebrate the small things, like it could even be like, I made my bed today, or I made sure to fill up my car with gas if you're a teen who drives, or I did my dishes today. It can go a long way to continuing to be able to build up to bigger goals, from smaller goals to bigger goals. And it gives yourself a sense of accomplishment and increases your self-esteem. The next one is to practice self-compassion. This one can be hard because I know that a lot of times it's really easy to be hard on yourself and use self-deprecation as like a coping mechanism, but it's really important to use positivity and to affirm yourself and just be kind to yourself. When we practice self-compassion, you can ask yourself in your head, would I say this to my friend? Like if your friend or your kid's friend is having a hard day, would you say, oh, you're not doing enough, you're not working hard enough? Ask yourself, would I say this to my friend, or would I say this to a toddler? And if you wouldn't say those things to those people, then remind yourself that you deserve the same kind of kindness and that you deserve the same sort of care that anybody else would deserve. So practice doing that, even though it's hard. The next one is to get outside. Even in the winter months, I know not everyone is from the Chicagoland area, but even in the winter months, it gets like brutally cold. It's still important to get that sunshine, even if you can't be outside spending a lot of time. Opening up windows and soaking up the sun is super important. Because we're in the Midwest, we are very susceptible to becoming vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D is a crucial part of mood regulation, and it can help improve our mood. So people that might be a little bit more at risk are people who live in colder states, and then also women and people of color. So it's important that we utilize sunny days in the winter months. And then when it does start to get warmer outside, or if you do live in a warmer climate, it's important to soak up that sun when you get the opportunity. The next one is to spend time with loved ones. And I know that during COVID, this could be a little bit difficult, but it's important to stay connected. And we can utilize the technology that we have in our everyday life right now just to stay connected with people that we love and care about. So if it's not possible to see people in person, making sure that we utilize Zoom or Google Hangout or FaceTime, just to be in touch. I know that this weekend, my family's actually doing a family game night on Zoom with each other so that we can stay connected. And that's a really good way to just be spending time with loved ones and to boost your mood. And then once it's warm outside, or when it's safe and you feel comfortable, you can have a socially distanced hangout outside, just to make sure that you're staying connected, because right now it's really hard to be separated from the people that we love. And then the sixth one is to drink your water and eat your greens, which I know is like really annoying, because I feel like people are always harping like, eat your vegetables, drink your water, do all that stuff. And that can be super annoying. But it's really important to just make sure that we're feeling good on the inside so we can be feeling good mentally. Even if it's making sure that we're getting a fruit with our breakfast, or we're drinking a water bottle just drinking water throughout the day. I have a gallon water bottle somewhere around it. I have a gallon water bottle that helps me remember to drink my water throughout the day, just because it is hard sometimes, but it's really necessary to give your brain the nutrients that it needs to function correctly. And the last one is to give yourself breaks, whether it's going to bed early, putting down some work that you think that you need to get ahead on, or work for later on in the week, or it's taking a 30-minute break in the middle of the day. It's really important to just give yourself room to breathe. If you're feeling overwhelmed, then it's really important, because you're just a human and you need time to step away and give yourself a little bit of that extra care and allow yourself to have a mental health day if you need to. Remind yourself that you are just as important, if not more important, than a class or a meeting or anything else. So if you're looking for more self-care tips, be sure to sign up for our March scoop of advice, where it'll be completely surrounded or completely based on self-care for teens and their parents. So let's talk a little bit about stress. When talking about stress, it's important to remember that there can be positive stress and there can be negative stress. So positive stress, or eustress, motivates, it's short term, it's perceived within our coping abilities, it can feel super exciting, and it can improve our performance. So some examples of that might be stress before a theater performance or a sports game, or, if you're like in high school or middle school and you're asking someone out or going to a dance with someone, like those things are positive stressors. This stress is healthy. It helps us want to become motivated and strive to do better for ourselves. It helps us build upon our strengths, and it helps us excel. And now on the other hand, we have distress. So this can cause anxiety or concern. It can be short-term or long-term, and it's perceived outside of our coping abilities. It feels really unpleasant. It decreases our performance. It could lead to mental and physical problems. So a lot of times when we hear about people being overworked or overstressed, we hear about high blood pressure, we hear about heart disease. A lot of times this causes us to feel really overwhelmed, and it can lead us to a state of burnout. So a couple examples would be interpersonal conflict, if you're fighting with a loved one, if you get injured or you have an ongoing illness, or if you lose a loved one. Again, this is unhealthy stress that could lead us into a state of burnout. So what is burnout? Burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. A lot of times burnout comes from work and or schoolwork. So it occurs when we feel overwhelmed and we're emotionally drained. The stress continues, and then you start to lose interest and motivation that led you into the certain role in the first place. So when you think about taking on too much, if you say yes to too many projects, if you say yes to too many extracurriculars, this can cause you to become a little bit burnt out. And in these days of e-learning and working online, burnout has risen pretty high to the surface, which makes it a lot more important to talk about. Excuse me. So some signs and symptoms of burnout in teens might be anxiety. So they're feeling agitated, more nervous than normal, some depression, feeling fatigued, weight gain or weight loss or isolation, a lot of detachment or apathetic. So they don't really care about what's going on around them, just kind of whatever about it. Another one would be cynicism. So everything is kind of negative because of the next one, which is lack of self-esteem or lack of confidence. And because of that, nothing that they do seems to be good enough. So they feel like, why do anything? And they lack motivation. So this could look like procrastination or having some trouble concentrating. Stress and burnout actually go hand in hand. So when I was creating this, I was having kind of a hard time showing how those two things might go hand in hand. So if you look at the little people that I put on the top, you see that the one that's stressed looks like their brain is like gonna explode, and it's like going and going and going, and that leads to the second one, which is somebody who's just exhausted. So it's like the Energizer Bunny, right? You're running, and then eventually you just have no more to give. And that's when you become burnt out. So stress is characterized by overengagement, right? So you're just going, it's like when you work out and then your muscles are just tired. Your emotions are overactive, which is what anxiety is. And it produces urgency and hyperactivity, which causes a loss of energy. And then it tends to lead to anxiety disorders. And the primary damage is physical, again, leading to heart problems, leading to high blood pressure, things like that. And then burnout, on the other hand, is characterized by disengagement. Emotions are blunted. And produces helplessness and hopelessness, a loss of motivation, ideals, and hope, and tends to lead to detachment or depression. And primarily the damage is emotional. But I know that can all seem like really overwhelming. I know that like reading a list of just like it's it's all bad. Like it can be really it can be really overwhelming, but it's not hopeless. There are a few ways that we can counteract stress and burnout that increase our overall mental wellness. So teaching mindfulness. Mindfulness is the basic human ability to be present and be aware of where we are, what we're doing, not reactive, and just not being overwhelmed by what's going on around us, being really grounded in what's happening. Mindfulness is a skill and it needs to be taught. There's a lot of apps, actually, even YouTube videos that can teach mindfulness. And I have a couple of mindfulness apps that are linked later on in the presentation. The next one is to let your students have breaks. If your student is showing signs of burnout, it's a sign that they need a break. Allow them to have a mental health day where they can just like hang out and not do work and recharge, do things that they like or things that they need to feel better. Just like if they had the flu, you wouldn't be like, hey, you have to go to school. You would allow them to sleep it off and take their medicine and relax and come back when their immune system has fought this off. Similarly, if their brains are just telling them like, I can't do this, then this is a time where a mental health day might be good. And you can even spend it together, just relaxing the both of you and kind of doing something that brings you both peace. The next one is to help with time management. Help them allot time for all of the things that they do, especially if they're a busy kid, just like going and going. So helping them allot time for all the things in their life, not just homework, allowing them time for socializing and personal time, and helping them get there if they're at their job, just allotting time for them to do all the things that they need to do to be a whole human. Because while school is very, very important, it's also important to teach them full life skills, which means that they have to juggle a bunch of things. And the more that we teach them how to time manage early, the better that will be once they end up going to college and then off into the workforce. The next one is to teach self-care, to encourage them to do at least one thing for themselves a day, whether it's get outside for a walk or taking a longer shower, or doing their favorite hobby. It's necessary to give themselves room to breathe and to just do something that they enjoy, to get that, that dopamine, and that serotonin like flowing in the brain. Just giving them time to do some things that they thoroughly enjoy, so that when they have to do things that might cause them stress, they know that at least when I get this done, I can do this at the end, right? So just teaching them self-care. And again, the March Scoop of Advice talks a little bit more about that, and that will be in March. And then the last one is to teach them how to create boundaries. Helping them learn how to say no is a crucial life skill, and it's crucial to setting boundaries. So maybe your student is working and they are doing sports and they are in school and they are, want to hang out with their friends. Maybe their friend wants them to join the musical and then they're already overloaded. You can help them say, hey, you know what? It might be a good idea if you just go see the musical when all your friends are in it. It might be a bummer in the moment, but overall, it will help them learn that they're allowed to say no to things, even if it causes them a little bit of minor stress in the moment. Something that I just wanted to quickly bring up is that everybody has a different threshold for stress, and some people's are lower than others. So a lot of people who live with a mental illness tend to have a lower threshold for stress, but they're not the only ones. You don't have to have a mental illness to have a low threshold for stress. So this means that if something is stressing someone else out that wouldn't necessarily stress you out, you might just have a higher threshold for stress, and that's okay. But if someone is telling you that they're stressed or they're showing signs of burnout, then take those things seriously. Their threshold just might be not as large, and it's important that you help each other out. Also, practice these tips yourself so that your student knows that they are important, right? So if they see you modeling these things, they're going to say, oh, my parent is doing this or my loved one is doing this, so it must be important, and I think that I'll follow suit. So let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and mental health. I know it feels like we've been hearing about COVID for the entire dawn of time, but we should talk about how COVID is impacting our teens' mental health. So how exactly has the pandemic affected our teens? So 81% of teens say that their mental health is a significant issue for young people in the US. And 64% of teens believe that the experience of COVID-19 will have a lasting impact on their generation's mental health. Also, in this stressful climate, 7 out of 10 teens have experienced struggles with their mental health. And 61% of teens have said that the COVID pandemic has increased their feelings of loneliness. This study backs up actually a lot of information that I'm getting from the youth that I've talked to, where they've been feeling isolated and lonely during e-learning, because I think one of the best parts of school is being able to see your friend in the hallway and talk to your buddies at lunch, and kind of just like seeing the other parts of your support system that are outside of the home. So if you can encourage your student to find creative and safe ways to interact with their friends, this could be a crucial part of improving the mental health of the youth in your life. There are some really cool apps that you can use through FaceTime or Zoom, where you can play games with your friends and kind of have that interaction that you wouldn't be able to have necessarily without them. One specific one that I really like is called House Party, and it has the heads up game where it's like charades. So yeah, that one's called House Party. It's really great. I would highly suggest it. So there are some things that we can do to alleviate these COVID-related struggles. The first is to monitor stress levels, monitor your teens or your child's stress levels. Notice if their behavior changes, notice if their health or thoughts or feelings change. Check in with them. You don't necessarily need to hover, but if you're noticing that your teen is exhibiting some extra stress levels, then you can ask them and say, hey, like, I've noticed that you've been feeling a little more tired than usual. Is there anything I can do to help? This could be really crucial. And first of all, opening a window for them to talk to you about anything else. And second of all, just giving them, just letting them know that you care and that you're noticing these things that are going on with them. The second one is to listen to them carefully. If you're hearing them say that they're becoming overloaded, this could be an indicator that it is indeed time for a break. Listen to the way that they express themselves, and listen to you, and listen to themselves and allow them to just take a step back and recharge. Yes. And then the third one is to be aware of your own stress and how you're managing it. Ask yourself, how am I managing and expressing my own stress? You can talk openly about it with your teen or with your child, and remind them that they're not alone if they're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed or even annoyed that the pandemic is going on, as long as it is. This reminder that we're all doing this together and that y'all are doing it together could be a crucial bonding moment, and it will remind them that yes, adults are actually human too, and you have shared experiences. So I think that it's really important if you just remember to be open with them about how you're feeling as well. The next one is to encourage them to stay involved with other people, like I had mentioned before. So whether it's a weekly Zoom call with outside family members, if they're really close to their cousins or their aunts or their uncles, allowing them to just have a Zoom call with their other friends or family and having them FaceTime their friends and stay connected is really important. And then when it gets nicer outside, or if it's nice where you are, allowing them to kind of just go on maybe on a walk with masks on and being safe and having time to spend with their friends, because this is something that they're really, really missing right now. If I stress anything to you, it is finding a way to have your teen be able to be connected to the rest of their support system, because yes, you are their support system, but they're missing a really, really important part, especially in childhood and adolescence. It's really important for teens to feel like their peers are there with them. And then the next one is to develop a routine. So if your student has been switching from Zoom class to hybrid to in-person classes, it can feel really hard. Like they might have any sort of sense of control over what's going on in their life and what's happening to them. So encourage them to develop a few consistent things that they do every single day to give them a sense of routine and a sense of autonomy so they can do that on their own. I have been working from home, and I have recently switched up my routine to where I work out in the morning instead of in the afternoon, because that is how I feel most productive. And even if I get nothing else done in the house throughout the day, I know that I woke up, I did my workout, and I had my breakfast. Those are the three things that I've told myself that I'm going to do every day. So even if you help your teen decide on what are three things that you know that you can do every single day, this will give them a sense of productivity and a sense of autonomy. And people having autonomy is a really crucial part in having mental wellness, knowing that I can do this and that they can do something and they can have achievements on their own is super important for them finding their sense of self. And the last one is to encourage them to find activities to do away from screen time. Zoom fatigue and computer fatigue can be so real right now. A lot of my job right now is on the computer, and I know that after a long day of being in meetings, it can be really exhausting. So encourage your youth and yourself to take a walk outside or play with your family pet, or even practice one of their favorite hobbies, or even have a family game night if that's possible, so that everybody can kind of just take a break from consuming media and staring at a screen, which can just sometimes feel really heavy. So now that I've given you a little bit of background, what can we do with this information? Where can we go from here? How can we open up a conversation about mental health? And what can we do to alleviate some mental health struggles if they do develop? So this slide, when is it time to talk to your teen about mental health? Sometimes it can be really difficult to even know when it's time. And I ultimately don't want you to feel like you need to hover or be a helicopter parent, which it can sometimes feel overwhelming having all of this information and putting it into practice. But some things might be when something just doesn't seem right for a long time, but you're not really sure why. Um, if their behaviors seem different than other people in their peer group or their friends or their own behavior from before, if they're starting to have difficulties at home, school, or with their friends, and then if they exhibit any of the signs, or if they exhibit multiple of the signs and symptoms of mental health struggles we talked about before, again, I want to stress that, especially with depression, noticing if those symptoms are lingering for 2 weeks or longer, that might be a time when it's starting to, when we need to have a conversation with our youth. It's definitely not easy to have conversations with your teen about mental health. I know that when I was a teenager, it was really hard for me to say, hey, mom and dad, like, I am not doing well and I don't know what to do about it. And I know that they also had problems talking to me because they knew something was going on, but they didn't know how to come talk to me without me becoming defensive. So I just want to give a few tips on how you might be able to talk to your teen about mental health. So the first one is to make observations in a non-judgmental way. Let your student know what you've noticed. So you can say things that are pretty specific. You can say something like, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been hanging out with Johnny as much as you have before. You haven't been talking about Johnny as much as before. Is everything okay? Or you can say, hey, I've noticed that you've been going to bed a little bit early every night, but you still seem pretty tired. Is everything going okay? Just noticing, just showing them that you've noticed that something is different, and just not being judgmental about it, coming at them in a really kind-hearted way to show that you really do want to just have a conversation about it. The next one is to pick the right time for your teen. Find the right space, whether it's while you're taking a walk, or if you're cooking together, or if you're driving to maybe like somewhere that's a longer distance, if you have to go on a 30-minute drive somewhere. Find a time where you think that your teen is most comfortable. And if you try to open up the conversation and they shut it down, don't get discouraged right away. Just know that you've opened a door and they hear you. Sometimes it's kind of hard right away. It might make you feel a little bit guarded to show just like a really vulnerable spot of your life. So if your teen shuts down right away, don't get discouraged. There might be another time that might be better for them. So just kind of gauge the situation and see if this is the right time for your student. The next one is to be genuine. It is totally okay if you don't know what to say. Tell them that you're here for them, but also be transparent and say, hey, this is hard for me to talk about too. So I totally get if it's hard for you. Kind of just being like, hey, I don't know if I've ever dealt with this and I don't know how to deal with you with dealing with this, but like, let's work on it together. Let's be a team is really important in talking to your teen about their mental health. And the last one is that use your experience. So speak from your experience. If you've struggled with your own mental health, it's important for you to share that information with your students so that they know that they're not alone and that you're in their corner. So if you've ever struggled with some anxiety, or if you've struggled from depression, it would be really important to say to your teen, hey, I remember at this time in my life that I dealt with X, Y, and Z. I know now as a 23-year-old that when I was younger and starting to go through some mental health issues, my mom was actually in therapy, and I just learned that about her in recent years. I think that's something that really would have caused a bonding moment in that moment. So if you're comfortable being as genuine and speaking from your experience as you can, I think that would be something that would really help the relationship and help the conversation go a lot easier. And then if your teen approaches you about their mental health, the first thing to do would be to validate their feelings and to listen to what they're saying. So listen to their experiences, hear their feelings, and validate them. Even if it seems like wildly out of the ballpark for you, just let them know that you hear them and that their feelings are valid. Because a lot of times feelings are not always rational, but they're always valid. So just let them know that their feelings are valid and that there are things that they can do to help them cope with these thoughts and to help them just have a better quality of life. And a great thing that I always say when it comes to giving advice is ask them if they want you to give them advice or if they want you to just listen, because sometimes people just need an ear. So asking them, hey, do you want my advice, or would you just like me to listen? Because I'm happy to do either. That's a really important part, especially if someone comes to you and asks you and wants to tell you about how they're feeling. The next one is pretty similar, is ask them if they've thought about what they might need to get better. Some students have and some students haven't. So if they haven't, offer to support and listen to them and talk it out with them so y'all can work together to figure out what the best next steps might be. And if they have, support them in following through with their needs. So if they say, hey, mom and dad, or hey, parent, or hey, aunt and uncle, I would like to go to see a therapist. Help them figure out the best way that they can find a clinician to help them out with their mental health. The third one is to learn. So if they bring you information, and then read that information so that you can know what they feel like is going on with them. And if they mention a specific struggle, read up on that struggle so you can best support them. So if they say, hey, mom, I think that I've been feeling depressed and I think that I might have depression, learn all that you can about depression. So when either you or your student talks to a social worker or a counselor or your primary healthcare doctor, you can give them specifics and see what the best next thing to do is. The fourth one is to keep it confidential unless it's life-threatening. So if your student comes to you specifically and says, please don't tell anyone, this is how I'm feeling, then keep it to yourself, because it can be really damaging for someone to open up and be really vulnerable and then have that information spread without them knowing. It can be really damaging. So just make sure you keep it confidential unless they say, yes, it's okay that you tell Uncle Bob. Yes, it's okay that you tell Aunt Shelley. Yes, it's okay that you tell XYZ person. Just make sure that you're keeping that conversation between the two of you. And then the last one is to prepare to be an advocate. Finding the right mental health treatment is like finding the right medical provider, or even like, I don't know, it can be really difficult and it can take a lot of time. Even right now, to be candid, I am looking for a new therapist. I just got back from college. I'm looking to find someone in the area. So it can take a little bit of time, just like anything else, getting an appointment for any other type of medical treatment. So just be patient and remind whoever is asking you for the help that it can take a long time, but just make sure you're doing the best you can to get the best care that they need. So let's talk a little bit about next steps for healing and helping for teens and for parents. So where to turn if your teen is struggling. It can be super stressful as a parent to know what to do when your child is struggling. So do be sure to reach out to any of these people or multiples of these people for resources for when you need to support your child and help them maintain their mental health. If you need some extra help on where to look, you can always reach out to the Kenneth Young Center staff, or you can reach out to your students' school social services to point you in the right direction. If you look at the bottom of the slide where it says the Kenneth Young Teen Resource Guide, this has a list of different Chicagoland area places where you can look to find a service for your students' mental health. Other places you can look are your primary healthcare doctor, any of the school's social services, clergymen, religious leaders, and youth leaders as well. So alongside seeking outside support, it's important for parents and their students to be able to use some at-home care to cope with mental health. So your student you and your student can take a look at some of these apps if they're applicable and see which one works for you. And then all of these apps are free and available on Apple and Android. So the first one is My3. It's a crisis intervention app. You can customize your own personal safety plan by noting warning signs, listing coping strategies, and connecting you to helpful other resources when you might need them the most. The next one is called Not Okay. It's created by teens for teens, which I think is really awesome. The user can add up to 5 safe space contacts that send a message when someone is feeling like they're in an emotional crisis. And it also sends a GPS location. The next one is called What's Up. It is a general mental health app. It uses cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance commitment therapy tools to help track mood, positive and negative habits, and as well as grounding techniques, which can be used for things like anxiety, PTSD, and more things along those lines. And it has a lot of other various functions. So you can look into that one if you're looking for a little bit of mood tracking. The next one is an anxiety app that's called Mindshift. It stresses the importance of changing how you think about anxiety. And so it helps you cope with those feelings a little bit more. And then the next one I really think is cool. It's called My Life Meditation. It offers up to 30 free sessions for mindfulness, where it gives you an introduction to mindfulness practices. It teaches you body scans and a lot more. And they also have a more younger kid version, and it's called Stop, Think, and Breathe. So it has mindfulness activities for younger kids. So I think this is a great opportunity if a parent or an older sibling would like to use the My Life Meditation app, and the younger student uses the Stop, Think, and Breathe app, and you can talk about mindfulness and what you did on your apps each day. And the last one is called Smiling Mind. This app offers, it's entirely free. And as opposed to the previous app, which has 30 free sessions. And it has a couple of different structured programs like mindfulness foundations. So introducing you to mindfulness, mindfulness exercises before sleep, for relationships and in the workplace, which you can also use in schools. So those are the apps that I've just provided right there. But if you're looking for more apps regarding anxiety, depression, other mindfulness apps, eating disorders, OCD, bipolar disorder, addiction, or anything else, there's a QR code on the screen that you can just open your camera, and if you hold the screen down, it'll take you right to that link with the articles that explain what the apps do and show you where you can get it. So everybody needs support. We know that you also need support through helping your child through their various struggles in life. If you're looking for some extra support services at home or through online resources, you can take a peek at any of these foundations. They have different resources. They can connect you to other support groups. And they can answer some questions or give you their own personal experience to something similar that you and your student might be going through. So if you're looking for some support here locally, you can look into our parent services at the Kenneth Young Center. You can call the number on the screen and the extension there, and it will help you. They'll help you point you in the right direction. If you're looking for some other treatment options and support, you can locate. You can use any of these two locators through SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or through the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. These are treatment locators, so they can help point you into a place that might be near your area. And one of my favorite sayings is that it takes a whole lot of strength to ask for help when you need it. So just know that as a parent, even you being here is a sign that you really care and that you are really wanting to help your student in these moments where their mental health might be suffering. And so it takes a lot of strength for a student or a parent to ask for help. So I applaud you for that. So now I'll take any questions if there are questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask any questions. And then if I don't know the answer, please send me your email through the chat so I can answer those questions. Or have someone else reach out to you who knows the answer. So go ahead and ask any questions that you might have now.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Hogan. I was curious about the teens. Is the depression has been hired during the pandemic. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. In a couple different studies, there has been reports of higher depression, which can be linked to the isolation or loneliness that students might be feeling right now. This has also been mirrored in adult studies as well.
And what about adults and the parents? I mean, I don't know. Is it a specific age category that it's all around?
It's pretty like spread around adults as well, because now parents are taking on, the role of teacher, the role of all of these other things, as well as having their own jobs to do and taking care of the family at home. But yeah, generally, the pandemic has exacerbated some of the mental health problems that either were already there or have created another problem in and of itself. Move on. If you do have questions and I missed anything, you can go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat. Or you can send me an email, and my email will be on one of the next few slides. So I just want to thank y'all for coming to this presentation, and just let you know that our next scoop of advice that I've been plugging throughout will be on self-care. Oh, there is a question in the chat. So the question in the chat is, once school goes back to normal, how do you help a tween transition back into in-person and such who has anxiety? So creating a routine, I think that would be one of the best ways, and just being patient. Just making sure that there is some sort of routine that is similar, which is why even now, while they are not necessarily in like in person or in normal school right now, having those things that are consistent now can alleviate some of the anxiety that comes when things are changing. I personally deal with anxiety, and having that thing that's consistent all the time is super helpful and me feeling like I'm grounded and I don't need to be as anxious. I hope that helped a little bit. Yeah, I'm glad. Anything else?
You have another question. This is Kirsten again. What do you do if a parent? 'Cause I deal with a lot of parents who have kids at home, and they're having a hard time dealing with their own feelings along with the kids. What would you recommend for parents who are doubling up on tasks and
Yes,
being?
absolutely. So my thought in that dealing with that would be to kind of just first of all have an open and honest conversation with the kiddos, and just be like, hey, mom and dad are tired too, like we understand that this could be so frustrating, and mom and dad are frustrated too. And also just like setting aside time when kids are asleep, kids are watching TV on their own or whatever that may be, setting just parent time aside to be able to say, okay, I need to take a break. I need to like ground myself, and also utilizing any of the resources that I sent through apps. I would highly recommend for people of all ages. I use a lot of those apps as well, or those types of apps, especially the mindfulness ones, because they'll have like a body scan, or like a 5-minute like sit down meditation um, that you can just do in the middle of your day to kind of help ground you. Alrighty, well, we can wrap up if there are, oh, yeah. We can wrap up really quick with my part of the presentation before the raffle. So like I said before, so March 10th is the scoop of advice in English, and March 11th is the scoop of advice in Spanish, and it will be self-care for parents and their teens.
Alrighty, so with that said, if you don't mind, folks, stay on for one more second. We're going to do the raffle if you're interested in it. This raffle is a $10 gift card to Giftogram, which is a website that will let you choose, which vendor or store that you want to spend your money at. So if you'd like to stay or be entered into this, stay a moment. I'm going to then. Okay, so whoever is here, I will then spin this wheel, and then we'll see which of the folks who are here wins. Okay, so is Barbara. Okay, Barbara's still here. Awesome. Well, congrats, Barbara. We'd love to send you this gift card. If you don't mind, though, we will need an email address. Can you send me in a private message your email address, please? And yeah, with that said, Camille, do you have any last words for folks?
Yeah, we just want to give, Marion, if you go to the next slide. We just want to give a huge thanks to La Michoacana for partnering with us for these events, and for their delicious ice cream, which is why it's called Scoop of Advice. So if you have a chance to check them out, please do. If you're in the Schaumburg area, please check them out. And I just want to thank you all for coming to this presentation. If y'all have any more questions, feel free to send me an email. My email is there on the screen. It's camilem@kennethyoung.org. If I missed any of your questions or you think of something later on, please feel free to send me an email. And thank you for being here. And I hope that y'all have a safe and warm and healthy night. Good night.